Maine Coon's tabby cats? The question many Coonie owners have wondered. Welcome to Tabby Striped Cat, the place where we get curious about what's actually written into your cat's coat. And if you're here, chances are good you're already owned by a gentle giant, one of those big, shaggy, dog-like companions who chirps at you from across the room like it's got something important to tell you. So you already know the look. The thick ruff around the neck. The furry breeches on the back legs. Ear tufts that look like they belong on a lynx. And underneath all that glorious floof, that swirling brown coat, with dark stripes tracing down a broad face and that unmistakable M stamped right above the eyes. It's tempting to think that coat is * the Maine Coon. That the pattern and the breed are basically the same thing. Here's the twist. What you're actually looking at isn't a Maine Coon pattern at all. It's a tabby pattern. And tabby isn't a breed. It's a coat type that shows up in cats everywhere, from a scrappy alley cat to a farm barn cat, with zero relation to your Coonie's pedigree. So why does practically every Maine Coon you've ever met wear that exact same coat? Why does one specific pattern, the classic tabby, with its bold swirls, or its cousin the mackerel tabby, with its narrow vertical stripes, show up again and again in this one breed, more than in almost any other? That's not a coincidence. That's genetics, geography, and a couple hundred years of brutal New England winters, all working together. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what's written into your Coonie's coat, and how to read it like a pro. Before we get into the genetics, if you're new to the pack here, consider sticking around. We dig into cat identification and genetics like this every week, and it really helps when you subscribe. Let's start with what a tabby pattern actually is, because most people think it's a color. It's not. It's a pattern that sits on top of a color, controlled by its own separate set of genes. Every single domestic cat, every one, no exceptions, carries the genetic instructions for tabby markings. It's the ancestral, default pattern of the species. Solid black cats, solid white cats, pure orange cats. They're all technically hiding a tabby pattern underneath, masked by other genes layered on top. So the real question isn't, why do Maine Coons have tabby markings? Almost every cat has the code * for tabby markings. The real question is why that code stays switched on, loud and proud, in Coonie after Coonie, litter after litter. Now let's take a look inside the gene, agouti, and the tabby locus. To understand that, we need two genetic switches working together. The first is called the agouti gene. Think of agouti as the master switch for, should this cat show a pattern at all. When agouti is active, each individual hair grows in bands, dark, then light, then dark again, which is what gives that shaggy coat its shimmering, textured look instead of one flat color. The second switch is the tabby gene itself, sometimes called the tabby locus. This one decides which shape the pattern takes. The mackerel pattern gives you narrow, parallel stripes running down the sides, like a fish skeleton, which is actually where the name comes from. The classic pattern, the one most associated with our gentle giants, gives you those broad, swirling blotches, often with a distinctive bullseye shape on the flank. There's also tick tabby, where the stripes mostly fade into agouti banding on individual hairs, and spotted tabby, which breaks the stripes up into distinct spots. Genetically, classic tabby is recessive compared to mackerel. That means a cat generally needs to inherit that version of the gene from both parents to show the swirled pattern. Mackerel, meanwhile, is dominant, so it shows up more easily even with just one copy. Here's where it gets interesting for Maine Coons specifically. In a genetically diverse, wide-roaming cat population, strays and ferals moving freely, breeding with whoever's nearby, you'd expect a real mix of tabby types, plus plenty of solid colors diluting things further. But Coonies didn't develop that way. They developed in relative isolation, in one specific place, under specific pressures. And when a population is more isolated, recessive traits like the classic tabby pattern have a much easier time becoming common, simply because the same genes keep pairing up with themselves, generation after generation, instead of getting diluted by outside bloodlines. That's the first piece of the puzzle. But genetics alone doesn't explain why that particular pattern stuck around instead of fading out. For that, we need to talk about Maine itself. If this kind of breakdown is useful to you, drop a like. It genuinely helps this channel keep going. Maine Coons, they are built for the cold. Let's explore why this pattern survived. Maine Coons weren't bred in a controlled cattery with a checklist of traits. For most of their early history, they were working cats, barn cats, ship's cats, farm cats, surviving brutal New England winters with essentially no help from anyone. And when survival is the only filter a population has to pass through, the traits that stick around aren't the ones that look nice. They're the ones that work. A classic tabby coat, with its dense double layer and its broken up, mottled pattern of browns, tans, and blacks, does something very specific outdoors. It breaks up the outline of a cat's body against dead leaves, tree bark, snow-dusted underbrush, and barn shadows. It's camouflage. Not designed camouflage, but the kind that emerges naturally when the badly hidden cats lose out and the well-hidden ones survive to raise kittens of their own. Add to that the fact that agouti patterned fur tends to come with a slightly denser undercoat structure than solid-colored fur. In a Maine winter, that's not a small advantage. That's the difference between a cat that makes it through February and one that doesn't. It's the same rugged build logic behind the tufted paws that act like natural snowshoes, and the long, raccoon-like tail your coonie loves to wrap around its own face like a built-in scarf. So over generations, nobody planning it, nobody selecting for it on purpose, the classic tabby pattern simply won. The cats wearing it survived more often, bred more often, and passed that exact combination of agouti on, tabby locus classic down the line, again and again, until it became the signature look of the breed. By the time Maine Coons were being shown at cat fairs in the late 1800s, that swirling brown tabby coat wasn't a stylistic choice. It was the surviving evidence of 100 years of quiet, brutal natural selection. That's also why, even though brown classic tabby is the coat most people picture, it's not the only coat your gentle giant can wear. Because the actual breed standard was always about size, bone structure, those iconic ear furnishings, and temperament, not coat color, Maine Coons can legitimately show up in mackerel tabby, silver tabby, and even solid colors or tortoiseshell patterns once breeding programs later expanded the gene pool on purpose. But the classic brown tabby remains the one written into the breed's actual survival story, which is exactly why it still dominates. So, is your coonie actually a tabby cat? The honest answer is, it depends what you mean by is. Maine Coon is a breed, a specific set of physical traits, a documented history, a lineage. Tabby is a coat pattern that can appear in that breed, or in a British short hair, or in the stray napping behind your local diner. They're two different categories entirely, answering two different questions. One tells you what the cat is. The other tells you what the cat is wearing. But if you're asking why those two categories overlap so heavily and so consistently, why Maine Coon and big swirly brown tabby have become almost synonymous in most owners' minds, now you know the real answer. It's not branding. It's not coincidence. It's a recessive gene given room to spread in a relatively closed population, combined with 100 years of brutal winters quietly voting for camouflage and warmth over anything else. That coat isn't just decoration. It's a record of exactly what it took for this breed to survive long enough to become a breed at all. So the next time your gentle giant flops across your lap, chirping and trilling like it's got a full opinion to share, take a second look at that thick, swirling coat, that bullseye pattern on the flank, that dark M stamped over the eyes. You're not just petting a big, fluffy cat. You're touching a genetic memory, a blueprint built by a Maine winter, written in fur, and carried forward into every purring, 30-pound lap warmer living comfortably in a heated home today. Thanks for watching. Is your Maine Coon a tabby cat? Until next time, purrs and nose taps.